Hello everyone, and welcome to our tutorial, fellow tech enthusiasts, Linuxers, YouTubers, whoever you may be. As the title suggests, today we will install Fedora as a virtual machine with Oracle VirtualBox on Windows 10. If you are on Mac OS X, I will include a brief synopsis of the minor step changes you can have, but this will be primarily on Windows. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. We're going to start with installing our Oracle VirtualBox application, in which case open up your favorite browser and you'll go ahead and navigate to this link, which is the download section of the VirtualBox website. I'll have this in my description, so you can either type it out or just click on the link below. Now you're just going to navigate to Windows host, this blue box, give it a click Save File. If you're on Mac, you will click OS X hosts, Linux, and so forth. Leave this open as we will be doing the checksums, but I will get to that in a moment. So go ahead and open up a new tab. Here we will install our ISO. An ISO is a file system for optical disc media. It's essentially an image file which contains an archive of content, in this case an operating system. The extension, funnily enough, ISO comes from the original ISO 966 file systems. You're probably more familiar with this than you know, as it was commonly used for CD-ROMs and DVDs. But in any case, when you get to this link, you'll see a number of hyperlinks for different desktop environments. These are, as the name denotes, different environments for your desktop that come with different window managers, things like that, customizations. In this case, we'll be going with KDE Plasma. It is one of my favorites at the moment. It's very versatile, and a lot of Windows users will probably be more familiar with it intuitively. It is a little bit heavier, so if you do want something more lightweight, LXQT or XFC are good alternatives. But go ahead and click on KDE Plasma Desktop, then scroll down, click Download Now, and download. The link should pop up. Good. Hit Save File. If it doesn't, just click this link. So while that is downloading, go ahead and head back to this tab. We're going to verify our SHA-256 checksums. So click on that link. You'll see a huge blarb of text. Looks kind of scary and intimidating. It's not too bad. The first column is the checksum itself, and the second is a file that goes along with that checksum. Essentially here all we're doing is verifying the integrity of the files. The hashing algorithm is run against the files based on its contents. It generates a very specific and unique code. If anything in any of the files changes, this code will also change. So essentially we just want to run the hashing algorithm against our file and make sure that the result matches what they have here. This is just verification that a malicious actor hasn't done anything to the files themselves, which does happen in some cases. Pretty rare, but in any case, pretty simple to do, and I will walk you through that now. Go ahead and open up command prompt. If you're not sure how to, hit the Windows key and the R key together, and you'll pop up with something like this. Just type in cmd, then hit enter or OK, and you should get a nice command prompt as I have here. So go ahead and type in CertUtil -hashfile, and now we're going to do the location of the file on our computer. It might be easiest to browse to wherever you downloaded it. It's as simple as just clicking the download button, then open containing folder with this, and you'll see something like this. If you want, you can highlight the path at the top, do a Control-C to copy, click back in our command prompt, and right-click to paste. Now you're going to type one more backslash, because we need to specify the file itself. And we're going to do our VirtualBox one. If you start typing it out and you hit tab, it will autocomplete if there is something matching that. And then go ahead and say the hashing algorithm, in which case it is 256. Hit enter and it generates our hash. So you go ahead, easiest way to do this, highlight it with a double click, then right click to copy it. Go back to your browser, hit Control F to bring up a search, and then hit Control V to paste. If there's an exact match, it'll highlight it here, in which case there is. And there you go. That means our file matches, and it should be safe to use. So we're going to go ahead and do the same process for our ISO download of Fedora. You'll click Verify 64-bit. You see this page here, very similar. And this, I believe, is the one we're looking for. So in my command prompt, I just hit the up arrow key to go to my previous command, backspaced all the way to VirtualBox, and then typed in FED for Fedora, hit tab to autocomplete, then SHA-256. Hit enter, give it just a second. We have our hash, double click to highlight, right click to copy, Control F, Control V, and we have a match. Awesome, so they should be safe to use. That is a good thing. And it's okay, I kind of rushed through that pretty quickly. We could go very in-depthly on hashing algorithms. The important part is it just verifies the integrity of the files, and if the codes match, then you're good to go. So you'll go ahead, open up your VirtualBox installer. Everything in here, you'll pretty much just be hitting the next button. In this case, I've already installed it, so we're just going to exit out of that. Yes. But pretty much everything, you'll hit next. You don't need to configure anything in there. There's one step where it'll ask you for an install location, or I had a total mind blank. If you want to install shortcuts, things like that. Same process as most other applications, and then just hit finish when you are done. So that's the only thing we'll need to install. Once you have it installed, go ahead and open it up. You'll be greeted by an interface that looks like this, except you won't have these three here, as these are other VMs that I have already spun up for fun. As you can tell, I use this one for work. So now that we are in this interface, you'll go ahead and click either Machine New or the New button up here. And there are two different modes for setting it up. There's the Expert mode, which essentially just lets you configure most of the options in one panel. And then you go through settings and configure the other ones later, or Guided mode, which most people will be doing. And so we'll go ahead and do that now. I'm just going to call this one Fedora. This is my virtual machine folder. You can select yours. Make sure that you have enough disk space. We will be using around 30 gigabytes or so, depending on the operating system and your preference. Type is Linux. Version is Fedora 64-bit. If that option doesn't select or another one selects, not too big of a deal. It won't really matter later on. Hit next. This is the amount of RAM you will allocate to the machine. I have quite a bit, so we're going to do 8 gigabytes. But however much you installed, I would try and do at least 1 gig, but depending on how much memory you have installed on your computer. Hit next. We will leave create a virtual hard disk now checked. Click create, and you can go ahead and leave it checked as VirtualBox disk image. Next once more, and we'll go ahead and leave it as dynamically allocated. This just means it will automatically request space from the disk when needed, whereas if you'd like, you can select a fixed size, which permanently sets the boundaries of the disk on the virtual machine, but I usually just do dynamically, so can leave it as that. This is the location of our virtual disk image and the size. I'm going to go ahead and do 25 gigabytes. I believe for Fedora you need a minimum of 12. Could be wrong. You'd have to consult the documentation, but I would do at least 20 to 25, depending on your preference. And we'll go ahead and hit create. So before we start this bad boy up, we're going to need to edit a few settings. So we'll just make sure that Fedora is selected and hit settings. Now let's see, let's go over to system. And if you want to adjust the memory, change your mind from earlier, this is where you can do it. This task has to be done while the virtual machine is offline. And processors, you'll go ahead and allocate as many as you want. I have quite a few, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll do 6. Enabling some processors and memory will definitely help in the initial installation. It's not required, but it is up to you. A note, if this is all grayed out, you will need to reboot your computer and go into the BIOS and enable virtualization. All you do is reboot your computer, hit F2 or F11 or 12. No, I believe it's F11 or 12. You'll go into the settings of your BIOS, and there should be a tab or location. Most of the time it's automatically checked, but it just says to enable CPU virtualization. If you aren't certain how to do that or get lost in your BIOS, just look up the BIOS that you have in Google. There should be plenty of tutorials. Next, we'll go to the display. If you want to add any video memory, this is where you can do it now. And lastly will be storage. This is where we will attach our ISO that we downloaded earlier. Essentially what we're going to be doing is this acts as like a virtual CD. We attach it to our virtual machine and power it on, similar to inserting a disk into your computer and powering it on. And then we're going to go ahead and install Fedora from that to the virtual disk image that we created earlier. So go ahead, click on storage, click on this disk right here, and this is where we load our optical drive, this drop down menu. You may see ISOs you've used before. If not, you'll go ahead and click on the folder to choose virtual optical disk file and just browse to wherever you downloaded it. But we have it right here, so go ahead and click that and hit OK. Alright, now that that's set, go ahead and hit start. Might take a second to power on. Alright, then you're just gonna arrow. Alright, and it should boot up into the ISO. That took about 2-3 minutes. Your mileage may vary. We're going to go ahead and click install to hard drive. Give that double click and wait for it to pop up. And most of this is pretty intuitive. So what language would we like to use? English. If you have something else, obviously scroll down to it, select that, hit continue. The system installation location. This is where we select our virtual disk image that we created earlier. It is 25 gigabytes. We won't be doing anything fancy today like LVM, which is logical volume management. But if you would like to, we can certainly do a video on that later. Go ahead, make sure this is checked, and hit done. Now the root password, this is the admin account root as it is referred to. So this will be the password for the super user. Make it a pretty good password if you can, as whoever has access to this user has access to everything. If you would like to, you can lock it. I will not be, and I highly recommend not checking allowing root SSH login with password. I am kind of surprised that they have included that in the installer, but I definitely would not check that. It's a pretty large security concern in many scenarios. So next, user creation. This is where you can create a user if you would like, full name, and then username. This is the user that you would use to log into, and user you would use in a terminal. We're just going to go with John Doe, and then make this user administrator. All that means is there's a group that is by default installed on most Linux distributions called the wheel group, which grants admin permissions. And all that does is add the user jdoe to the wheel group. And we're going to go ahead and add a password for it as well. Alright, and advanced. If you do need to change the user IDs or the groups, as you can see here for the admin, it's being added to the wheel group. You can do all that here. We won't be doing any of that now though, so go ahead and click done. With that, everything else should be automatically configured. If you need to change the time, you can do so here. And then if you need to adjust the network and host name, you can do so here. For now, I'm just going to leave it as is. Then go ahead and click begin installation. This may take quite some time. If you have allocated other processors and memory to the device, it will help speed this portion of it up. I'll go ahead and fast forward and get back when it's done. Alright, the installation should be finished now. You'll go ahead and click Finish Installation. Then you'll power off the machine. Now we're going to go back into Settings, go to Storage, click on our disk, and we will remove disk from virtual drive. Now that we've installed the ISO to our virtual disk image, we can go ahead and hit Start. If you do not remove the virtual disk, when you boot up, it will go straight into the ISO again, and you'll be stuck at the installation until you remove it. So you go ahead and hit Start, and you should see a screen like this. If you see a black screen like this, do not worry. It takes a couple minutes to boot up, depending on the hardware that you may have, maybe faster or slower. Alright, and you'll be greeted by this lock screen. Should automatically open up to your user. Go ahead and type in your password, hit enter, and boot into the desktop environment. As briefly mentioned, we picked KDE Plasma, so we'll check that out as soon as it loads up. Alright, you can see we're Booting up into our desktop environment, first thing you're going to want to do, hit this icon at the bottom left, similar to Start menu for Windows, and you'll open up a terminal. Now we are the user jdo. We are going to escalate up to the root user. You can go ahead and do sudo-i, hit enter, and type in your password. If you are not an administrator, then you'll just do su-root to switch users, in which case you'd enter the root password. You can go ahead and type clear or press Ctrl-L, which will clear the screen. Now this is the first thing you should always do when you open up into a new machine, Linux distro, whatever it is. If you are not root, you'll type sudo in front of the command, but since we are root, you go ahead and do dnf update. And essentially what we're doing here is updating every package on our machine. Most of them will be out of date. Typically, when you download an ISO, the ISO may be anywhere from a couple days, weeks, or months old. And since the ISO was released, many of the packages on it are also out of date. As you can see here, it says we have 477 new updates. Right now, our update manager, DNF, formerly Yum, is reaching out to all the repositories, downloading metadata and other things that it will cache locally on our device. That takes a few minutes, and once that's done, it should populate up with a list of updates to install. If you'd like to make this go faster, you can do the DNF space update space -y, which means automatically infer yes for whatever transaction you're about to do. Alright, so here's the transaction summary. We will install 8 packages and upgrade 469. Go ahead and type a Y for yes and hit enter. This will take a little bit of time. I'll go ahead and fast forward and touch back when it's done. Alright, now that our install is done, there is just one more step before we get on to using this. As you'll notice, some of you, if you hit to expand the window, or if you go into, let's see, view, virtual screen 1, try to resize it or adjust window size. Whoops, did not mean to open that up. Let's go ahead and close that. You'll see that this window doesn't change the desktop itself. That is because we are missing the VirtualBox Guest-Additions. So to do that, pretty simple process. Go ahead and go to Devices and insert Guest-Additions CD image. You'll go ahead and see there is now a cdrom device attached, and all we need to do is mount it. So I've gone ahead and written out the commands you'll do. So first, there are a number of packages we'll need to install. I've gone ahead and written them out. We'll need to enable a shared clipboard, so we'll do host to guest, and we should be able to paste that in here like so. Maybe not. Alright, there we go. So I just did Control-Shift-V to paste it, but you'll need to install these packages: gcc, kernel-devel, headers, dkms, make, bzip, perl, libxcrypt, and so forth. Go ahead and hit yes. I'll have that in the description below as well. You can just copy and paste. Go ahead and install that. Shouldn't take too terribly long. We're not installing too many packages. Some of this may already be installed, but I believe you'll be missing most. Alright, now we'll go ahead and make the directory to which we'll mount the cdrom to. So as you can see here, we mounted it to VirtualBoxGuestAdditions. We're going to go ahead and set a variable, which means we're just going to assign this value to this name whenever you call that name. So in this case, kernel directory reads it out. So these backticks run a command, in which case uname-r, and all we're doing is appending this output to this path, and then we're assigning it to this variable. These double ampersands just mean if this first part completes successfully, do the next part where we export the variable. This isn't too important, you don't need to fully understand it. You can just copy and paste and not have to worry. But if you would like more information on bash, which is what we're in right now, we are in a bash shell. I am planning on making a number of guides and tutorials on the basics of that. So keep an eye out for that in the future. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section. So now we're going to cd or change directory into media VirtualBoxGuestAdditions. And now we're going to run the VirtualBoxGuestAdditions script. Go ahead and type yes. Alright, so that didn't take too long. The final step will just be to reboot the machine. You can type reboot, you can type shutdown-r now, or you can simply click the exclamation, or not the exclamation, the X button at the top. I'll just go ahead and hit reboot. And the reason we need to reboot is there are a number of kernel modules when we updated, as well as when we installed the guest additions that were adjusted. The kernel is kind of like the brain of the system. And so typically when you install new modules, they cannot be dynamically added. I believe in kernel version 4 and up, there are some that can be with ksplice. But for the most part, you will typically reboot after a kernel update. Alright, now when it reboots, as you can see, it should be up to full screen. Go ahead and log in. If you do need to change the resolution, you can go up to view, virtual screen run, resize it to any size that you need. If for some reason it did not work, go ahead and run through the installer again. Just the same steps we did. Sudo-i, make the directory if it got removed, mount-r dev cdrom to / media VirtualBoxGuestAdditions, kernel-dir equals, cd into it, and do / vbox-linuxadditions.run, and give it another reboot. If it doesn't work that time, update in the comments, let me know, and I can try and help you out. But yeah, with that, this is your workstation. It should be all set to go. KDE is pretty intuitive, lots of customizability. If you guys want me to do a video on the basics of KDE, how to configure things, it comes with lots of pre-installed themes. You can change windows, backgrounds, etc. Let me know. But anyways, that concludes this tutorial. If you liked the video, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you did not, then drop a dislike. Let me know what we can do better next time. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Bye.